Hey everyone, welcome to our virtual PD, CRO virtual PD event, our second one. We're really excited you could join us today. We just want to take a second to remind you to check in on the chat to the right of your screen so we know who all is watching with us today. And also, if you're watching the archive, please be sure to check in on the comments below.
So today we're going to be talking about flipping your classroom. And flipped learning is a really exciting but can be a controversial approach to teaching. We're going to have a couple of guests in to share some information and some of their experiences in the classroom. And we also have some resources and some apps that we want to share with you.
Yeah, and always we'll be monitoring in the chat as well throughout the event. So be sure to post any questions or comments you have for either Aaron and I or even our guests. We'll check in there throughout time to time to get those on air for you guys. So.
Speaking of guests, we have with us Jacob Bane.
Yeah, Jacob is an instructional designer here at Ohio State University's Office of Distance Education and E-Learning. Jacob works with the Ohio State University faculty on designing courses, both new and existing, for online instruction.
Prior to his time at Ohio State, Jacob was an instructional designer at Coastal Carolina University and the University of Akron, right?
Correct.
And before then, he was a middle school teacher at Montgomery County, Kentucky.
Yes.
Wow.
Well, welcome, Jacob. I'm glad you can make the long walk down the hallway to be with us today.
Of course, of course.
Really excited you could be here and just talk flipped and blended classroom for us. It's been a pretty hot button topic.
Right. Exactly. Yep. And I'm really happy to be here. And flipped obviously is the hot topic right now. It's sort of one of those buzzwords that everyone sort of wants to jump on the bandwagon and sort of see what it is right now.
Very cool. Well, speaking of kind of that buzzword, I know a lot of teachers are looking at the difference of flipped classroom and blended classroom and hear those terms. But I know that there's a lot of confusion out there on what exactly is considered flipped and blended. And could you go into a little detail on the difference between those two?
Sure, exactly. So basically the general idea of a flipped classroom is that you take some of that traditional lecture-based content or just content you would cover within the physical classroom walls and actually have students cover that content on their own time at home. So that could be a video, that could be an internet search, that could be reading, whatever it is, sort of that baseline content that you would normally cover in the physical classroom. And then, so what that does then and frees up some of that physical classroom time and actually allows you to work hands-on with your students through discussion, case studies, things like that. And you can actually scaffold then the students' learning levels above what they could normally meet on their own time through the traditional homework worksheets, problems, things like that. So it's a little bit different than blended because sort of blended allows you to still do some content in the classroom, some content at home. It sort of goes back and forth, whereas flipped, if you're a completely flipped classroom, you have all of your content covered in the outside environment and then come to the class to actually engage with the students.
Very cool.
And so you did a lot of research on flipped classrooms here at OSU. Can you kind of elaborate on what you found? And
Sure. Yeah. So the idea of flipped is really just sort of the main buzzword right now. But from what I have read, results are really encouraging because most students today that I have seen really want to be engaged with the content. Sort of the laid back, having just all of the content sort of read to you. I think that idea is sort of being pushed aside for this really engaging technique. So whether you call it the flipped classroom, whether you just call it active learning, whatever it is you want to call it, students are going to be coming to class wanting to be engaged. And I think more K-12 education is going to be moving that way. So as these younger students, sort of move up to the college ranks, I think more and more students are going to be used to that active learning environment.
Yeah. And obviously we touched on before you became an instructional designer, you were also a middle school language arts teacher. And so at some point you decided to go down that road of pursuing instructional design and also kind of researching and learning more about the flipped classroom. What kind of sparked your interest in that, or how did you get involved?
Sure. So it actually, I didn't really start looking at the flip until I started at Ohio State. So that was about 3 years ago when I started at the Fisher College Business. And so I think at the time, the flipped classroom was sort of the big buzzword. And so we really just wanted to see how that could be effectively put into our Fisher College Business courses. So I started doing, actually doing some research and then working with faculty to move some of this flipped classroom techniques into their classrooms.
Cool. And you mentioned flipped kind of the buzzword right
Sure.
now. And so are there any other kind of classroom models or things like that that you've heard coming down the pipe or that you want to touch on outside of the flipped or blended classroom?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, obviously I feel like every 2 or 3 years, there's some sort of new buzzword within, just education in general. So I think most, recently sort of the buzzword of MOOC, which is massively open online course, was sort of brought up. And I think New York Times called 2014 the year of the MOOC. But I think the thing to keep in mind is no matter what buzzword, what teaching strategy is there, the idea is that you want to create a positive learning environment for the students. So whatever way you think can allow you to effectively do that is sort of what will work best for your classroom. There's no one size fits all here.
Yeah.
So flipped classroom may work great for one content area, but it may not work for another. So find the method that works best for you and then pursue that path.
That's really great advice for any teacher. So one last thing I wanted to touch on, we don't want to take up too much of your time, but what do you see the classroom of tomorrow kind of becoming? We've seen this recent shift, but what do you see coming down the pipe in the next 5-10 years? Sure.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's going to be more content available online. And I was just reading actually like an article about 30 minutes ago that a lot of the baseline knowledge students can now get in an online environment. So the role of the teacher is really shifting to that of facilitator and scaffolding that baseline knowledge up to the expert level of the teacher and or the faculty member. And so they are able then to move that baseline knowledge to their expert level. But I think the covering of sort of just, what is the standard 2+2, stuff like that, students are going to come to class being able to access that knowledge on their own time. And so they're going to be able to, come to class to get sort of that higher level learning.
Yeah, it's really exciting stuff right now to be in education and in the field. So can't wait to see what happens.
Sure.
Definitely new.
Yep.
Well, as I was saying, we don't want to take up all of Jacob's time answering our questions. For the last few minutes we have with him, we want to make sure that he has time to answer your questions from our CRO teachers. So to do that,
we have Cheryl manning the chat. So if you have questions, now would be a great time. If you haven't already typed in some questions, send them off to her.
Cheryl, anything going on over there yet?
We do not have any questions yet.
Okay. So we'll circle back around and check those out here in just a little bit. So like we were saying, be sure to write any questions you have for Jacob or ourselves in there about flipped or blended classrooms, or really anything. It doesn't even have to be necessarily on that topic.
Sure.
And we'll try to address those here in a little bit. And I know we also have, you provided us with some really great resources earlier that we'll have posted in our iTunes U course. And so we want to share that with everyone. So maybe we can take a couple minutes to look at some of those. And Aaron, I think you might have those available on your iPad.
Definitely.
So the two I sort of want to highlight out of that resource list as there's sort of two that are sort of OSU centric. And so I guess we'll highlight those, and the other ones you guys can just sort of click through, at your leisure.
Okay.
But so the first here is actually, it's this iTunes U course. It's called Flip Through Design. And so it basically looks, at the flipped classroom and allows you to actually develop a flipped classroom through instructional design. So not actually just moving that, like flipped classroom and how that works for you, but moving it in a designed manner. So not just doing one thing here, one thing there, but how to actually look at the design level of your flipped classroom and then move it up. So it's a thoughtful process to create your flipped classroom. And so a companion to that course is actually this iBook. It's also available on Android. It's called Flip by Design. So it's basically all of the content knowledge in that Flip Through Design course, and it is in an iBook and or EPUB form. And so it's all in there in terms of all of the actual baseline content knowledge. So if you just want all of the knowledge of the course and just to read through it, that would be in the Flipped by Design book. And then if you want to actually work through the activities and all of the engagement in terms of, all right, so step one, I want you to, map out your course objectives. That would be the iTunes U course, whereas the content would just be the iBook. So those are two really good OSU-centric resources that are available out there. And I think they're going to be posted within your, course, but actually if you just Google Flip Through Design, they are the first two things that pull up.
That's awesome.
So there's the Flip Through Design iTunes U course, and then the Flip by Design book.
Yep.
And sure. And so this is just a PDF. So this was actually a hour-long session we did on OSU's campus about a month ago now. But yeah, so this is just a good general idea of do's and don'ts of that flipped classroom, and then a lot of those resources that are going to be highlighted in your course are on that sheet as well. But the biggest thing to sort of keep in mind when you're flipping is that don't just flip because it's the newest trend. Do what's best for your students and for your course.
Yeah.
And then also, I always try to work out that you don't have to flip all at once. So maybe try just flipping one lesson.
Yeah.
Maybe try flipping just one content topic. So move into it gradually, because if you try to flip your entire course at once, you're not going to know what works best for you, your students, and your course. So maybe try it one time. If it works, great. If it doesn't, sort of make a few tweaks here and there, and then get it to a working state that works best for you. So
be flexible.
Yeah.
Yep.
Great advice. Great resource. So we appreciate you guys providing that for not only OSU, but all of our teachers.
Sure.
And as well. And I think we may have some questions from Cheryl now, coming from the chat, as if I can speak. So
of course.
Let's check it back in with Cheryl. Cheryl, what do you have for us?
Yeah, so Annette Lang from Biomed, she's asking about what tools you use, how you make it interactive, and also how you check for viewing.
Sure. Yeah. So there's like numerous tools like you can use. I guess if you are involved with OSU at all, there's obviously like the media site tool that you can use to actually get all of your lecture content recorded. If you are not like available at OSU, there's this really good app called Explain Everything for iPads, which allows you to actually create content, engaging content with students. Or there's a lot of apps out there and software available for PCs, Macs. So Jing's a free one. Allows you to capture your screen, anything on it, so you can walk students through problems, things like that, and then actually be able to do call outs, and actually call out parts of that screen. So those are really good things. And then in terms of engagement within like the classroom, so there's like a number of ways to do it. But the best that I've seen is actually just engage students within like discussion, actually have a Socratic discussion, and actually, answer questions with questions, allow students to sort of work through those things, I guess work out their own process to those like conclusions. Don't just give them the answers, and then be able to have case studies, do like small groups. So I always like a jigsaw activity. So actually you give different groups within your class parts of that content, and then you give them 5-10 minutes to sort of review that content. And then those small groups actually come back and teach the class that piece of the content. So you have the class teaching the class, and then the teacher is honestly just the facilitator.
Yeah.
In terms of view counts, so there's like a number of ways to do that. Obviously, if you're going to be using like a learning management system, normally you can see who is viewed and what they're up to. Or if you're going to be using YouTube, you can obviously see, like view counts there. But the, easiest way to make sure that students are doing this work outside of the classroom is hold them accountable to it. So do a quick little quiz when, either right before they get to class through the learning management system, or right when they get to class. Make it a low stakes quiz. Make it only 2 or 3 questions. Make it there's no like tricky questions there. It's honestly exactly what they should have learned. And then they're going to be held accountable for what they should have done outside of the class, and that means they're going to do it. Because if you make something worth points, most students will actually do that work.
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
Right.
yep.
That's really cool. A lot of really great resources, a lot of really great information. Do you mind if we share your contact information at some point with
Sure,
our teachers?
that'd be
to
great.
reach out to you?
That'd be great.
Thank
Excellent.
you. Well, unfortunately, Jacob has to head out. However, we really want to thank you for coming in
Thank
and
you for having me.
volunteering to chat with us and
Of
our
course.
Catalyst teachers. It was very informative.
Great.
I learned a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. And with that, we actually have a couple more, I think, apps and resources that we want to share that you put together for us, Erin.
Yep.
So I don't know if you have those available that we can pull up. And then
I do.
in just a little bit, we're going to have our next guest joining us right after this, which will be really exciting. In fact, we have one of our very own CRO teachers that'll be here, and Dr. Foos, who actually opened up, I think, our kickoff, will be here. So we're really excited to have both those here talking about their experience with the flipped in classrooms. So stick around for that. But first, let's go through a couple app demos. What do you have for us?
Well, so to begin, I basically picked 3 apps.
Okay.
Explain Everything, Google Drive, and Notability.
Okay, big hot ones right now.
Right, pretty much. So what I was thinking is, in all reality, if you do a video and you do it in Explain Everything, you can give those directions. Then you can go ahead and you can export it to your Google Drive.
Okay.
And then once it's in your Google Drive, you can send it off to the students so that they have it. And not only have I included the video, but I've also created a sample PDF. So the students can see the sample PDF that you've recorded with Explain Everything, and then they have it for themselves. Once they have it in their Google Drive, they can then import it into Notability from their Google Drive.
Okay.
And then they can annotate on there.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of teachers using that.
Yeah, Notability is really, really useful because students can ask questions, they can annotate, they can collaborate. So, if you give them the directions on what you want them to do, all they have to do is go ahead and do it. Then they can send it back to their Google Drive, and then it's available for you.
Very cool.
So if you are going to start with flipping, these would be 3 really quick, really easy. A lot of teachers I know are already using Google Drive. They're already using Explain Everything. And Notability is one that we did give to our Catalyst teachers. So those are 3 super easy and already available to you. You don't have to buy them. You don't have to download them. They just are already there for you. So those are my recommendations, just real quick to kind of get the ball rolling, get started. Just start experimenting.
Absolutely. And if you guys have any questions as far as any of those apps or the demos that we're doing, again, be sure to post those into the chat for us, and we'll definitely get to those as soon as we can. We're going to be doing another app demo here in about 20 minutes or so. So we'll hopefully be able to address some of those questions that you have regarding any apps or anything like that for flipping the classroom then. But right now, we want to take a couple minutes to welcome and introduce our next 2 guests, Dr. Matthew Stoltzfus and Jen Moracco. Dr. Foos and Jen both bring varying degrees of expertise with flipping the classroom, and both are doing some really amazing stuff with tech in the classroom. So welcome, guys. We appreciate you taking the time to be here. Jen, you came down from Dublin, Kaufman, right?
Yep.
And I know you haven't necessarily, I don't know if you started yet, but I know you're working on exploring flipping the classroom and things like that. And Dr. Foos, you're kind of flipping the classroom on a massive scale. Your typical lectures, 300 plus students. So just as a pretty large group to deal with. So that's very exciting stuff. But Jen, even though you're not flipping the classroom, you've been working with Aaron and I and CRO quite a bit, and been doing a lot of really cool stuff with the tech that we've been giving you and trying to utilize it. So we want to have both of you guys on just to kind of give that varying degree of expertise and talk through that. And again, we're going to be going to Cheryl here at some point with some of your questions as far as flipping the classroom. So if you have any questions for Dr. Foos or Jen, be sure to start putting those in now, so that way when it's time, we can get those questions up for you guys.
So Jen, you are just kind of starting in that flipping process. Do you want to explain to us just kind of briefly, what are you doing?
Sure. I've been using Explain Everything, the app that you guys provided for us, a lot. So it's been really useful, and I usually link that to the Schoology site that I use with my IB students and my bio students. Then I'll link it to my YouTube channel as well. So it's something I haven't required them and made them watch it, but they're there and available for students that are absent or students that just need to go back and review maybe like a Punnett Square or a pedigree analysis, like I'm working through the problem and they can check their work, I guess.
I need to review a Pundit square.
It's been a while. If you don't apply it, I guess you lose it. So, Dr. Foos, obviously we said you're flipping on a large scale. When did you kind of start exploring that from a lecture perspective at a university? How did that kind of come about? Tell us that story.
Well, the cool thing is it was driven by student comments and student interest. There's a student named Eric Langendorfer who talked to me about potentially flipping the classroom, and if I've heard of Khan Academy and what was available through that platform. And then I just started experimenting a little bit. And then I put all my lectures online, because a lot of the traditional mindset is, well, you have to cover topics X, Y, and Z. So I did that by putting them online. And that allows you to, in the classroom setting, really kind of go up to the higher level questions, because I think most of my students can understand the basic concepts. So if I test on concept A, I'll get a good score, concept B a good score, concept C a good score. But when you integrate them together, the success level for the students on an exam, it drops dramatically. So now I can integrate those together in the classroom, and to give them a little bit of glimpse of how a chemist would think through a problem like that.
Right. The real world is a little bit different from the
That's right.
school world.
Right.
Well, and this question is really for both of you. Is there anything that when you were first starting out, Jen, that you're just like, I wish I would have known to give that advice to teachers who are thinking about starting or just starting, and they can take that and apply it to their own?
I feel like you just need to be able to just jump in and try something new and not be afraid of technology. Just click around, try new things, and don't worry if it's perfect or not.
I would say two things. Number one, it's not all about the videos. It's about putting the content together to get the students and to learn. A lot of folks want to start with the videos and then go the other way. If you do so, that's going to take up a lot of time. And in most cases, those videos are out there and available to you. The second is some advice given by a guy named Eric Mazur from Harvard. He's an expert in peer instruction. And basically what he was saying is that, a lot of people say, oh, you can flip this, you can flip that. His advice was take one question per class. If you have a 55-minute lecture, pick something around the middle to kind of break everything up, and start with just one peer instruction question per class. And as opposed to doing one thing for an entire semester, then taking a week to try something new, students have to adjust to that.
Yeah.
But if you can get them comfortable with knowing that one time during that class period, there'd be a peer instruction question, the students get used to it. What you typically find is that students are more engaged during that particular portion of the lecture, and it should encourage you to keep doing that. So, and for most instructors, if it's a 55-minute class, we want to do something to break it up in the middle. Using peer instruction is a great way to do that. And I think all of us have enough time to write one question for that, as opposed to trying to redo your whole course all at once.
Yeah. And speaking of kind of redoing your whole course, when you're kind of creating content for the flipped classroom and creating videos or whatever it may be, resources, do you find that you need to update those frequently, or is that something that can kind of live out there for a while? Or how do you, I think that might be a concern for some teachers, is there's a lot of work on the front end. Is that something that can live on for a while, or what's that life cycle look like?
It all depends on how you put everything together. I put a pretty comprehensive course together. And in doing so, it's kind of lived, and I haven't really updated a lot of the videos that I've done. But I have updated and changed what I'm doing in the classroom.
Yeah.
So it's almost like the supplemental material is already out there that can kind of stand the test of time. But what you do inside the classroom is what I kind of modify. And then every once in a while, one of the things I think we have a misconception with is that we should do the same thing for every topic in the course.
Yeah.
Whereas some particular concepts might be good from a demonstration, some might be a molecular level simulation, others might be an experiment. So you kind of, as you go along, think, oh, this would be a good idea to put here, and so that has kind of changed a little bit. But for the most part, once I've created the video library, that's there, it's there for the student use. And I'm trying to modify a few things that I've been doing in the classroom.
Very cool. And I know this is something that Jacob touched on a little bit, but that accountability piece. So, you are assigning your students to go do X, Y, and Z at home and come to class prepared. How do you maybe ensure that that's getting done, or and maybe it's different from a college level to a high school level with that accountability piece?
I think assigning points to an assignment is probably the best way, and the way that some of the students, will do it. I would think the difference between high school and college, our homework grade is only 7% of our final grade, and pretty much all of their assessment is exam, or the other letter grade comes from exams. That might be a little bit different, but only with 7% of the grade, the students will really do it and try to get all those points because they're attainable. So I think assigning some type of online homework with the topics that you're covering keeps them up to speed.
Very cool.
Discussion boards too,
Yeah,
I think are helpful because you can see who's participating, who's not, and there's if your peers aren't participating, like it's kind of embarrassing, I think, for you as a student.
Are you doing discussion boards?
Yes, and Schoology is a good resource for that, I think.
So
That's
how have
platform.
how have your students been responding? You doing discussions and having Schoology and that sort of thing? Are they actively participating, or how's that working
My
out?
seniors are absolutely. That's a place where they go and ask questions. I'll open discussions before like quizzes and tests, and they're there participating. Sophomores are a little bit different, so they're just getting the gist of things, I guess.
So it's experience,
Yes.
still learning how to be
student
high school
responsible.
students.
Yeah.
Definitely.
This question is kind of for both of you. What are some of the barriers out there that of teachers facing that are kind of preventing them from maybe taking those first steps, or flipping their classroom, and what are some resources out there to help them overcome those barriers or challenges, if any? And Jen, you may be able to speak firsthand with what's keeping you from really taking those first steps and things like that.
I would say time for sure. This is the biggest one. Definitely access to resources, just understanding and knowing how to use technology. Those are probably the three biggest barriers, I would say, or hurdles.
Time's definitely one, but in terms of trying to overcome that barrier, I would think if you look at some of the current research that's being done on these topics, Scott Freeman has a really good article that they published through the University of Washington showing, large level lecture classes and how adding an interactive component to them has really enhanced student grades and the learning outcome. So I think the more you look into the literature and the more that's being published, the better argument you have to try to implement this in your own classroom.
Yeah, I know one thing I think a couple of our teachers asked about it after the kickoff that you presented at Dr. Foose was you're using some software, some programs with questions and things like that built into videos and kind of managing the class and outcomes. And I don't recall exactly what that is or how to get access to that, but I know that was something our teachers were interested in.
So I use a program called Mastering Chemistry, and the Mastering platform has many disciplines in it right now. And so they have digital assets that I've helped create. So what Pearson has done is they've hired some instructors from across the country. We actually filmed that one video that I showed out at Brigham Young University. So we flew out there, we did the video, they edited it all up and then put it inside the homework platform. So there are a lot of great resources, both free resources and resources that would be a cost to the student that come with the textbook that you can really dig in a lot deeper than just the pages of the book. We're trying to bring these things to life.
Yeah.
So that's what we did with those videos we showed.
Very cool.
Nice.
I know another thing I'm sorry, I feel like I'm jumping on the questions a little faster than
then I can keep it. He's
I'm
okay
a
on
talker.
camera.
I'm a talker. What can I say? I know one thing that interests me is, we talk a lot about barriers that keep teachers from flipping the classroom. What are maybe some of the barriers that students face when all of a sudden they're integrated into a flipped classroom that they've never experienced before or that they're struggling with? Is there anything off the top of your head you can think of as far as students' responses of what they think about your class, Dr. Foose, and maybe some of the students' responses to some of the new stuff that you're doing with your class, Jen?
There's a website or they're an organization called Digital Promise. It was put together, it's a nonprofit put together by Karen Cater, and they have a really good article in their research tab about like effective, learning strategies.
Yeah.
And what I often find is that students will come and they'll tell me how they learn, they'll tell me what they do. And if you look at some of the practices that they're doing, they're on the not so successful list on that page. And she has, her team has put together a lot of research articles on this. So, just thinking of students with how do they use effective learning strategies. And one of the top ones is, self-testing,
Yeah.
or having a low stakes tests that we do. So we do low stakes tests in recitation, and a student will say, well, I didn't really do well on that. And I was like, well, that is a big, light bulb should go on your mind that I need to study a lot more for this, and I'm not where I would like to be. So the more low stakes testing that we can give our students to show them that they need to study. And what I'm finding, and from my vantage point, is I need to explicitly say what I want the students to do. So if you got this problem wrong, you have to do this homework problem. If you don't, I expect you to score poorly on the exam, right? That's just how it is. You need to go out and learn that stuff on your own because you're behind, most of the class. So just little strategies like that, I think have kind of helped. And students aren't used to this, so they think basically what they've had in the past is the best way to learn, so to speak.
Yeah.
I see that struggle in high school students for sure, that they don't know how to just be students. Like they're just really struggling with that. So I think providing them with access to like lectures that you did online or an explain everything quick video to go back and look at is super important.
Right.
And a platform to go home and ask questions, like a discussion board, or think about using the Google Chat function that we do in the future. That would be something interesting to try.
Kind of on the same topic, students are coming to your classes and knowing how to be in school, knowing how to be a student in the traditional format.
Yeah.
You hand them something like this, and they're very unsure now. How long do you kind of take to go through like that management process before you sort of say, okay, I'm done showing you, like we're done taking baby steps now. We're doing the course like this, or we're doing the class like this. Do you have any ideas or any guesses? Or are you still in that process?
I would say I'm still in that process.
I mean, you kind of, the way that I like to do it is I give the students an option. You could either before class, I want you to read the book or watch the videos, and then you have to do these homework problems. And for those in the traditional sense, I don't think anybody has gotten to college without reading a book, right? So that's something they're used to. It's like, here, read these sections. This is what I'm expecting you to be responsible for when you get to class. And the first week or so, I'm kind of, lenient in terms of, assignment deadlines and things like that. But then we transition into, okay, let's start, really going with this, and we need to, push through. But I think I will mention announcements and go a little slower, at least with the lecture questions and what I'm expecting, or that my expectations for the students, in probably like the first 2 weeks. And then once that 2 week, buffer is there, we just keep rolling.
I'd be interested as well what that classwork looks like. And obviously it's gonna be very different for you, Dr. Booth, than you, Jen. But do you have any ideas on what that in-class work would look like once you start flipping? And for you, with a 300 plus student lecture hall, what's expected of the students in that kind of setting?
Me the first.
Yeah,
well, I would definitely want to flip with my IB class, because we kind of have a lot of labs that we need to cover and get to, and spending time lecturing seems wasteful to me. So I could see that really opening up more labs, more time for labs, and certainly more time. We have some like practice workbooks that I think would be really helpful to give them more time instead of at home when they could ask questions in class.
Yeah, absolutely.
One comment that you made that just triggered something else in my mind. One of the other things with like the flip class is that I think it's forcing the students to do the work that we would like them to do. Yeah. A lot of times we assign homework problems, traditionally in college, they're just, they're optional. We're not going to grade them, but the quiz is going to be based on those problems. So, the rule of thumb that my colleague uses is that for every credit hour you have in college, and our course is a 5 credit hour course, we expect them to do 15 hours a week outside the classroom, right, to be successful in our course. So it's like, we can now put these assignments together, and a lot of the comments that I get are, well, I don't have enough time to watch all the videos, I don't have enough time to read the book, I don't have enough time to do this. So time management, I think, is really key with our students, because if you're telling me you don't have enough time to read the book or watch the videos, in my mind, you don't have enough time to take the college course that you're enrolled in. So think about what you need to do and how you can adjust some of that stuff. So in terms of helping the students and getting them to where we need to be, it's that time management piece it's different, because if you're getting a score online, the student will do it and they'll stay up all night to do that, right? As opposed to, oh, I'm just suggesting these.
Right.
They might not do that quite as much.
Yeah.
So it's a challenge in that regard, and the students sometimes think that they have way too much work to do, but that's almost like our expectation. And I gave a pre-test last fall, and the low score in my class was a 4 out of 25, and the high score was a 23 out of 25. So that's my range, that I'm trying to deal with and trying to keep everybody up on the same page with that. So that's something that when you're flipping the classroom, you really need to keep that in mind.
Very interesting. And you talk about that range. What kind of interventions do you have to do if you see, this, and how do you assess whether, okay, are they not learning the material because they're just not getting it, or are they not adapting to this flipped model, or how do you kind of assess what's causing that struggle, and what's the intervention for that? And obviously with 300 plus students, you're obviously limited on that.
Right. Freeman's article on his interactive classroom stuff, they showed that the DFW, we call it the DFW rate. So students who either got a D, who have failed the class or withdrew from the class, that DFW rate went down in the flipped instruction. I've never seen any type of instruction where the DFW rate went down to 0. So, but it's one of those things where it's, with the sciences, they're tough courses.
Yeah.
And we try to put prerequisites on there, because we're not putting a prerequisite on a course to tell a student they can't take it. We're putting a prerequisite there because we know that if they don't have that prerequisite, they're not going to be successful. And you hear stories about the range of the high school instruction that we get. And, not every student is equal coming in the front door.
Yeah.
I'm trying to do some other ways where, can we have programming, say, in the residence halls, where we pick students who have taken the course before and done well to be tutors, right? So there's a disadvantage to trying to have individual instruction with 300 students, but I've had 600 students that have just gotten through the class this past semester. So there's plenty of mentors that I can use to help the students out and to try to succeed.
That's very interesting. Jen, do you have any input as far as that?
It's a different ballgame in high school because there's English language learners, there's students on IEPs, there's higher students that need extra work. So you always have to be prepared to give that student an extra assignment because they want to learn more.
Right.
Or you have to take your lesson and remove some of the extraneous information for an ELL student.
Do you think that that freeing up of in-class time can really help you with all those varying levels of students?
Absolutely. I feel like I'm doing it anyway, on a regular basis, but if you had the time due to a flipped classroom, I think it would absolutely help.
And Jen, I'd be interested, I want to get to our questions online here in a minute, but I'd be interested to hear, now that you've been with the College Ready program for a little while and you've been kind of experimenting with stuff, what are some of the other teachers around you noticing or seeing, or what kind of feedback are you getting from admin on some of the stuff that we're doing and that you're doing in the classroom?
I would say just the tight-knit people that I see every day. I've been talking to them a lot more, hey, let's do a video together. What do you think about that? I'll share this resource with you if you think about sharing something with me, that kind of stuff, I guess.
And with that, you talked about sharing resources. Fus, do you have any recommendations for resources out there? Because I'm sure you're not strictly developing all your content, but pulling from elsewhere.
One of the things, to comment on, to make a comment on what you just said here, I'm finding now that some of the other sciences know that my suite of videos are available. For example, for biology, they might not want the same videos as engineering might want, but we can put these remedial courses together, because from a higher ed standpoint, we're finding that the funding is being cut for remediation, kind of like across the board.
Yeah.
So, to have those resources there. And one of the things, like say for engineering, we teach thermodynamics in Gen Chem, and they're going to need it their junior year. They may have forgotten it, in the last 2 years. So how can we develop a suite of videos that's tailored to a specific course, that they want you to learn? Like same thing for me in my class. We talk about math. Like there's a couple chemistry problems where you need to use a quadratic equation. Some of my students maybe have never seen that since 8th or 9th grade, right? Could you do that right now?
Is there an app for it? I don't know.
But I have a video though that can show you, how to go through and solve a problem like that. So when we talk about sharing resources, I think that's important to put together those remedial resources, because my course is a prerequisite for many other courses.
Yeah.
And can you pull them up in real time when the student needs them?
Yeah. What's that development process for you look like, Dr. Fuss, and even you, Jen, as you're sitting down thinking, okay, I want to create this content for the course in order to engage a flipped classroom? What's that timeline look like, or what's that kind of outline for your workflow to kind of create those videos or resources or documents or whatever it may be?
For me right now, I'm just using the Explain Everything app. I think about it from a standpoint of a student that was absent that day and what I really want them to know from what they missed in class.
Yeah. So really not a lot of thought or prep or anything like that. It's really just taking what you've already done in the lecture.
Take a worksheet that we did, or take a couple pictures of like the whiteboard that I used that day, like the active board, and then just importing them and Explain Everything, and then just talking over it and writing some things.
So you're doing it on the back end. Will that be available on the front end next year?
That will be.
I think there's two things that I keep in mind when I'm putting content together. One, you have like background content. So content I want the students to watch before they, get to class. And initially you just take that content. One of the things that I find is that students prefer a shorter video clip as opposed to a much longer one. So how can you chunk them and make them as short as you can? And then that gets posted. The second then is, how can I engage the students and make them curious about the content? So what I mean by that is I could do a video of a chemical, a chemical demonstration, and right before I put two things together, I can stop the video there, ask them a question, and I can start with that in class then. Okay. So it's one of those things that, how do you leave a gap so we allow the students to think about the problem that's happening in front of them before we give them the answer? Oftentimes when you're taking a teaching class, they might say, oh, make sure you allow the wait time and enough of time to go by before you answer the question. Most of the times when we're in front of a lecture hall, we'll answer in like 3 seconds when we really need to give the kids at least 20 seconds.
Yeah.
Right. So how do you use video to provide that gap time? So you can do that by giving them something ahead in class and some type of an investigation, and have them think about it and then answer it in class.
I love that.
What kind of tools or technology are you using, Dr. Fuss, as well as yourself, Jen? I know you touched on a couple of things to help kind of produce some of this content or manage some of this content, things like that.
That's it. The easiest thing to do is, if you can get something on YouTube, you can share it anywhere.
Yeah.
Right. So usually what I like to do is I have a YouTube channel, and if you put that on YouTube, you can embed it pretty much anywhere you want. So I try to get all my video content up onto YouTube. I have a YouTube channel. It has all these demonstrations.
Do you want to plug it?
Sure. It's Fuss Chemistry Videos is the YouTube channel. If you go right to the YouTube channel, it might not make sense, because it's like, I have a 30-second clip that would be followed by a question, then another 30-second clip, then a question, then a 30-second clip. So like, unless you put them together like that, it may not make sense.
Yeah.
But I want the student to think about certain things and, kind of put them together and think about the demonstration and how something at the macroscopic level ties to the microscopic level, which ties to the equations that we write in our textbook. So how can you, interact between those three? And that's one of the things that I've really tried to do. So if you can get something on YouTube, it's really easy to share, and it's really easy to embed in pretty much anywhere.
Yeah. I think Aaron and I talked about doing a hangout coming up soon. That's basically just talking about using YouTube and creating playlists and managing that. And So hopefully we'll have that coming out to everyone soon. So very cool.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. But obviously, I want to imagine that our Catalyst teachers may have some questions for Dr. Stoltzfus and Jen. So I want to obviously toss it over to Cheryl. Cheryl, do we have anything going on in the chat or questions?
Yeah, so Tony from Kenston, you've sort of touched on strategies to help students feel less overwhelmed when asking them to do traditional in-class activities outside of a class, but are there other recommendations you would make to help with this?
Hi, Tony. Glad you're joining us today. Ladies first, right?
Oh man, I have a hard time with sophomores and accountability, but seniors, they're already learning how to be students, and they are pretty accountable. How was the question phrased again?
I think another thing is, so most college instructors are going to put the accountability onto the student. And that's the big transition that you see from maybe a senior year of high school to freshman year of college. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to pester you about your assignments and everything like that. So the thing that you can do, if we say this is a college ready program, you're hoping that we can instill those skills. It's tough with sophomores, right? It's easier and tougher with seniors, depending on what time of the year it is, right? So it's like, how do you instill those habits into the students where they're making themselves accountable and trying to do that, because getting that transition and there's, I think, scaffolding kind of to do that is I don't have the right answer or the magic bullet to try to answer that question, but it's a challenge that all of us face.
I've been using Remind Me 101 a lot. That's a very good app. The Schoology site itself, just when they log in, they can see what's going on. I'll tweet a picture of the board every day.
I see a lot of your tweets.
Yeah, it's a lot. It's annoying, but
Awesome.
But if they're following that feed, then that's something that pops up in there, is that they can say, oh yeah, I need to answer this question tonight, or I need to do this X, Y, and Z.
So those are great ways to prevent students from feeling overwhelmed, because you're sending out small but constant reminders to keep them on pace without having to feel like they have to do everything all at once, or waiting until the last minute to do everything all at once.
Right. And another thing is, some of the research is showing that with the assignments, it's better to have, if there's 3 hours of homework, it's better to spread that out over 3 different assignments than to give it as one large assignment towards the end of the week, because, well, if the students are anything like me, they'll procrastinate until that deadline. And, so set the deadlines and chunk that out.
Right.
And use what the research is showing as good study habits and good learning techniques, and model your due dates and everything like that around them.
That's good advice.
Nice.
Cheryl, anything else we have over there?
Yeah, a couple more. So Tony, also, you touched on the difference between a sophomore and a senior, but do you see a difference between an AP, IB, and a regular general course as far as participation? And
usually the more motivated students are taking the IB courses. So I do see that desire still to learn and engagement, they're really engaged in the learning process, and they've figured out how to be a student. I guess I've said that before, but I can just tell that they're more responsible than a general ed student.
Yeah.
Do you have any tips for engaging those gen ed students?
I tried that new Kahoot thing that everybody's been talking about. That was really engaging for them to be able to use their phones and to answer questions after a lab that we did.
Yeah.
Good.
So that helped. But that's another thing that teachers you have to go and do that yourself, and it takes time to make the questions. Not that much time, but it's just more to do.
Yeah, it's pretty user friendly though.
It was very user friendly, yes. And you can embed pictures, and yeah, it was neat.
Pretty cool. What else, Cheryl? You got a couple more for us?
yeah, Kelly asked, is it better to flip part of your class, or to go ahead and do all of your classes in that flip style?
I think that somebody mentioned the guy that was here before said a little bit at a time. In a book that I read, I can't remember the name of it, but it was about flipped classrooms, and it was a PD course that I took, said that you should do a little bit at a time.
Right. And just like what you
I
said.
said, my recommendation would be to flip one part of each class that you're teaching. And that will, I think as Jacob said before, if you do that, you can kind of figure out what works for you and what doesn't work. And if you're doing it once at a time, you can also then have a good control group to compare the traditional style of teaching versus a flip style of teaching with the same, groups, and you're not just dramatically changing something as you go along. So I think it creates a better control group for you. And you may find that there are some subjects or topics that you're teaching that maybe just an old chalk talk lecture would work great for.
Jen, do you have
That's a good segue to the next question. So are there
Weird.
specific content types that sort of lend themselves to this flipped approach?
I think that any time you're trying to represent something at a particle level or creating some kind of model for something, especially in the sciences, really lend itself to some type of animation or online type of simulation. So I think them seeing that and playing with it, there's a bunch of simulations out there. If you're in the sciences, there's a group called, they make PhET simulations. It's PhET. There's a lot of great simulations, but I think you need to develop content behind them. And their website has like some lesson plans and stuff like that of, if you have this simulation, we know it's right at the molecular level. How do you address certain misconceptions and how do you deliver it to the students? So their website is really good with that. So I think in the sciences, anything at the molecular level works really, really well with the flipped environment.
I think another good resource too for just biology, Bozeman Bio, if you Google that, it's a YouTube channel. This guy's flipped his classroom, and you could borrow all of this free content out there so that you don't have to go and create your own video. I use those a lot. Go home and watch this, 8-minute video that this guy did, and then I want you to answer these 5 questions about it, and then we're gonna come back and talk about this topic tomorrow.
That's awesome. Yeah. There's a chemistry high school teacher, although we have the famous Dr. Fuss, so but John Bergman, 2 G's, he is one of the, I don't know if he was one of the original, but he's very well known in flipping. And so high school chemistry, it seems like the sciences and math are 2 of the more popular subject areas to flip. Do you have any idea like why that might be, or just because you can
I think it lends itself to like open, like you can ask a question, like you have, I don't know what the word I'm looking for is, but like if you have a topic, you can usually pose a question about it and then have them go discover, I don't know.
Right.
I think there's two reasons. Number one, if I would look at Ohio State's chemistry, physics, calculus, and engineering courses, the GPA is much lower than some of the humanities type courses. So it's difficult content. So I think there's a lot more in work going into trying to improve the instruction. Yeah. So there's been different models to go through with that. Another thing is, chemistry is an experimental science, right? Like it's not just, hey, memorize all this stuff.
Right.
You need to look at the data. You need to interpret the data. You need to come up with a relationship. And then how can we cultivate that thought process in our students? How do we get them to use the scientific method? I think that lends itself very well to a flipped classroom.
Excellent.
Makes sense.
All really good stuff. And it looks like we're running short on time, but we do want to thank Jen and Dr. Fuss for coming on to share their experiences on the flipped classroom with us. Again, really great stuff, guys. It's great to have voices from the experts. And if anyone, again, has any questions for Aaron or myself or any of our guests, even in the archive, if you're coming back, you can post those in the comments below, and we'll be sure to get answers for those as soon as we can. So Thank you again, guys. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
And then I think right now we're going to do maybe any more app demos that we have?
We sure can.
Okay. If you have anything that you can show us, that would be excellent, Aaron.
Sure. Well, let's just go ahead and start with the camera. I mean, we're flipping, so you're talking about a video.
Can show the behind the scenes.
So,
what's going on.
So if you want to,
oh, I think we're not sharing.
Oh.
We got to go to our share.
Sorry, technical difficulties.
we're using an Apple TV to wirelessly stream our iPad. So this is something else that you guys can do in your classrooms. If you have access to an Apple TV at all, you can wirelessly stream what you're doing. So if anyone's interested in how that's being done.
So you can just use the camera on your iPad to create videos. Wave hi. And that, so this is our behind the scenes. And it gives a really good example and of, you know, what you want the students to do.
Yeah. You
can do your selfies. You can have your students create videos. And I'm going to take that off of me now. So another thing is the reflection piece, asking the students to explain what their questions are or what they don't understand, and that sort of thing. And all of the videos can be uploaded to YouTube. They can be uploaded to just your album, and then from there they can always upload them to Google Drive and then submit them to you. And that's just going to make things a whole lot easier, because if they are working on something at night and you're not available to answer their questions, they can send you those questions, and then you can address them the next day in class.
And I think the big thing that Dr. Fuchs mentioned was to not let perfection get in the way of good.
No.
When you're creating videos or content, and just getting it developed and put out there.
Don't, you know, your students are not perfect and they expect you to not be perfect as well. It's going to make your relationship a whole lot better if you mess up and you say, oops, sorry, let me go back and let me fix that. And just building that relationship is going to hopefully strengthen your instruction and strengthen the relationship, so that the students are giving you what you want and they're intrinsically motivated.
Well, and I think to kind of start a discussion on that is, when your students see that your expectation of videos or content or things like that isn't perfection, they're going to be much more relaxed when producing their own content to deliver or share, which kind of, I think, makes it easier and makes them more comfortable and open to do those video confessionals like we talked about in the last physical PD. And
you want to create a culture where it's okay to make mistakes, it's okay to fail, because you know that you can always go back and fix it, just like you can in real life.
And speaking of which, that may segue into our artifact for this segment. So we always like to give you guys a little assignment to apply what we're doing. And since I don't like to be the bearer of bad news or the bad guy, I'm going to let Erin deliver that information.
Well, so it's been posted in iTunes U. And so basically what we want you to do is we want you to flip a lesson. And actually, after talking with Jen and Jacob and Dr. Fuchs, I'm going to go back and I'm going to make a small edit.
Okay.
Because I'll be honest, it absolutely never occurred to me to flip just a tiny piece of one lesson on a regular basis. It seems to make so much sense. So, like, we asked, you are included in that.
Thank you.
We asked that you choose a lesson, give your students some homework to do the night before, let us know in some way what that was. If you send us the links, or if you send us the PDF, or if you just, you know, record us a video telling us what it was you had the students do, and then use your iPad to film your lesson the next day as a flipped lesson. Now, if you choose to do the one question, I'm going to ask that you kind of show us maybe 3 or 4 so that we get an idea of how that's going in your class. And basically the purpose is so that you get a chance to experiment and feel what it's like to flip your classroom, so that your students get that same experience and then know what you're going to tweak. But we just want you to have fun with it. And enjoy it.
That's what it's all about.
Right.
And of course, as always, if you guys have any questions on what we're expecting of you, don't hesitate to reach out to either one of us. You can reach out to me, but I'll probably just pass it on to Erin because she is a really good problem solver. And you can reach us at collegereadyohio@osu.edu. Make sure you're getting our newsletters, obviously, that are coming out. If you're not getting those, yes, be sure to let us know. But really, we want to thank everyone for hopping on with us today, hanging out, learning about the flipped classroom. I think we had a lot of fun. Hopefully you guys like our new kind of virtual PD format.
We would really like some feedback about that.
So hopefully this is a little more engaging, interactive. And so thanks again, and we'll see you guys soon.
Don't forget to register.
Oh
for
yeah,
Innovate.
Innovate 2015. Register. Good enough.